Welcome to the Tearing It Up podcast. I'm your host, Taryn. We'll be tearing it up, tearing it down, and tearing it apart, dissecting all things related to those who deviate from the standard. From leaders of their industry to leaders of mediocrity, and maybe a gear review or two thrown in. We shoot the shit and let the conversations flow, so if that's not your style, this may not be for you. Otherwise, listen in. Hope to light a fire in you somehow. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Tearing It Up podcast episode. This week, I've got Dani Reyes Acosta with us. So, did I pronounce everything right there?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say Reyes Acosta, but
okay. Yes, I need to get the accent in there. I love it. It sounds beautiful that way, much more than my hoarse morning voice. But anyway, so I found
welcome to NA.
Yeah, totally. And I got up this morning and my podcast posted today, for this week, but I've had some issues with it lately. It didn't go to Apple, so I've been straight on the screen trying to figure out where that went, and that's annoying. But so it was just a jumble of technology mess this morning. Anyway, so I found Dani a few years back. Actually, it was in 2020 on Instagram. I don't know if it might have been through. Actually, we have a mutual friend, Jen Callahan, and she's here in Tahoe. Yeah. And so it might have been a post she shared or who knows what through the explore page. But I was like, whoa, what, this chick seems awesome. What's she up to? Just splitboarding away, all these winter adventures. And that's where I felt connected to her. And I've just been following her along Instagram since. And then I have heard her on Justine Moulier's podcast, Creatives in the Wild, and just other places. And now she's doing these films, the Outlier series. And that's most recently where I've been okay, I got to have her on and talk about what she's doing here and just learn more about her background and everything too, how she got involved in the space, how she got into production, into the outdoors in general. So Dani, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this, what feels like early morning hour because it's still cold for both of us. But where are you physically right now?
Unseasonably cold. Yes. Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm in Southwest Colorado, and it is unseasonably cold. It is. I'm wearing a puffy jacket and a beanie, which is not normal for May. But actually, what am I saying? It's Colorado. It's kind of high here. We're in the high desert, so cold nights are common, and it'll probably be a perfect 65 degrees today.
Right?
But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's kind of par
Colorado,
for the course. Yeah, here in Tahoe, I mean, it's last Saturday, it snowed like a foot. So it was just welcome spring. You just never know what you're going to get. Snow, sun, heat, cold, whatever. So it's just kind of just a mystery every day is what it feels like in these types of areas.
Yeah. And the forecast is only maybe 60% correct.
Yeah, I quit looking at the forecasts long ago in the winter because you just never know. I don't want to get my hopes up and then be okay, it didn't snow at all. And then in the summer, I'm just I don't need to. I just know it's going to be sunny. So
yep,
you just never know.
Absolutely. No, well, need God. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I think we just had a little connection issue there, but I was just going to say, I completely forgot what I was going to say, so you go ahead.
So my partner, Johnny, and I went for a tour yesterday, and we found a really exciting mix of spring snow, which means crunchy coral reef that has been covered in dust. That is probably not going to corn up properly, and some fresh snow, which was not sticking to the layer beneath. So yeah, we had a beautiful day, long walk in the mountains, but it was so cold starting off. But by the end of the day, it was perfect spring temps. So I guess all that to say, spring, every season, you never know what you're going to get, and you just kind of roll with it.
Absolutely. So speaking of where you're at, and because I've seen some stuff on socials, and do you have some animals? Do you have like a farm or
Good
work on a
question.
farm?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. So Johnny and I have right now we have a flock of 12 ducks. And we have it used to be kind of an off-grid situation. Turns out the town didn't like that. So, note to any aspiring hippies out there, if you want to do whatever you want, you should not live within town limits. But yeah, so we have an orchard. I think we'll have a small production garden this summer, which means we'll just have things that we can grow for ourselves, things that in the fall we'll end up putting up in, canning and freezing and dehydrating and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, making meals and sharing meals with friends and folks who are passing through. So I love food. Food is a really critical part of everyday existence, but particularly, I think, for adventure folk. And so, I can't speak to his journey with this, but for me, especially after, I don't know if you know this, I broke my back in 2020.
Oh, I
So
did not.
so we just passed the 4th anniversary of that. And
Wow.
then in 2021, I broke my hand, and of course we had a pandemic. And so all of these 3 factors really, really challenged how I interfaced with the outdoors and like what I thought was good or valuable time spent outside and what my objectives were and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, we both like learned that sometimes you have to slow down and get to grow some food, and that staring at ducks do weird duck stuff is actually like super entertaining and quite the like dopamine rush.
I love that. I love ducks. I love ducks. I
They're
want a
so
duck so bad.
silly.
I am
They're
so
crazy.
bummed that my co-host Amber couldn't be with us today because she has ducks. So she
Oh,
did well with her partner. They have recently kind of split, so she doesn't have the ducks anymore. But
mm.
they live in town limits. I don't know how they've gotten away with their ducks.
Oh no,
Maybe
no, the
ducks
ducks
are
weren't the
fine.
problem.
Okay.
I will say the ducks weren't the problem. It was the composting toilet.
Oh. Okay, okay. Yep, I could see that. I could see that. Um, but yeah, she would connect so much on the ducks and just like living off the Leanne Turner ex-partner. They were very much so into that, and they have property together that they're trying to continue to kind of build up and teach their son all of these things too. So I know she'll at least really
Yeah.
enjoy listening to this, and then hopefully down the line we can connect again too, because you two will totally be able to go
Oh my
off on
gosh.
that.
The special ag episode, ag and
Yeah,
entrepreneurship. A
absolutely.
sidebar.
Yes. We're off the grid right now, me and my boyfriend Andrew, but we're not really in the position to be able to grow anything right now because we don't really have the water source for that. But I might try and get a little planter this year and do something like some kale and squash or something pretty easy, because I do miss having the garden of just going out and picking a little bit for my salad or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll test the water, see how it does up here. But
Yeah.
so you broke your back and your hand. Like,
Yeah, during the pandemic.
how did you
And
break
it gets, I was gonna
and
say,
it gets what?
and it was in a brand new community I'd never lived in before, like super
Oh
rural.
my goodness. Was this snowboarding or
Yeah.
splitboarding?
It was on a sled mission. Actually, we had
Oh.
a snowmobile, yeah, like rescue mission. So, Johnny had broken a sled like a week before and gone out there and fixed the part, but fundamentally, it was like pretty deep in the woods, and so he'd gone out there on another sled and so on, but like only you can only drive one snowmobile at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out there to go get the sled with him, and we had just a really amazing day of like waist deep, thigh deep powder, and just beautiful day. And at the end of the day, we were coming home, and it was not the day where everything got locked down. It was like like the few days before things got locked down. But if you remember how people were kind of being weird about like, don't do risky stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm driving the sled very slowly. Like, I feel confident in my snow abilities and snowpack. Like, everything's going to be okay. And then it wasn't. And it wasn't. And I don't know if it was my lack of muscle memory because I just don't like sled that often. So when like the throttle kind of like stuck open, I didn't know to bang the kill switch. I didn't know to like just eject from the sled. I didn't know like all these things. And basically the throttle stuck open. I tried to, instead of killing the machine, like hitting a kill switch, I like maneuvered it for like couple hundred feet through and over some like baby willow groves. And then it was a huge conifer that stopped me and flipped the sled. And it didn't flip on top of me. It like flipped in the opposite direction, but broke a ski, broke an A-arm that on the sled. And then for me, got the wind just knocked out of me. Thank God I was wearing a really burly backpack with this very stiff, like back frame, and then a helmet, obviously. And I got the wind really knocked out of me. And we thought, he was like, oh my God, am I watching Dani die?
Oh,
and God. I was just like, and in my head, I was like, I can't pay for a helicopter.
That's what's so messed up about our like system is that's what our first thought is in those instances is like, ooh, I'm not going to be able to pay for this. like, oh, you're in serious like medical condition.
I know, but then
that's what you're worried about.
Right. Yes. But then at the same time, I was like, well, that's good that I'm capable of having this thought. That must mean that most things are kind of working. So yeah, we self-rescued, and yeah, I broke my back. I didn't actually curiously find out until months later, because I don't know if you remember, but we were being told not to go to the hospital unless we had COVID symptoms. And I was getting all of these emails from my local medical center, Telluride Med Center, don't come to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I won't go to the hospital. You know, I could walk and talk, and it hurt. Like, it kind of hurt. Like, I was getting sore, but I shouldn't say it kind of hurt. It, like, really hurt. It's hard to, like, get up and later. Down. Yeah. But, like, I went back to Wyoming because we were in like, Idaho. And, went back to Wyoming to go climbing in the summer. And it was only after carrying a huge backpack to go climbing in the winds that I realized that I was like, my back really hurts. And then I went and got an X-ray, and they're like, you have a broken back.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So that was an exciting lived experience. I did everything on my side for like, a few months. They told me not to sit up anymore. So I just turned to do as much, like just lying on the side of my bed, sending emails and attempting to work. Yeah.
Oh Lord, that's crazy that it was just so long after. But yeah, like you said, that time was so crazy that it was, unless you're ill, like COVID symptoms, like they didn't want you around. And so yeah, if you had any other injury, and I do definitely remember that was why people were kind of scoffing or giving any kind of dirty looks if you were out, like outside doing anything besides walking, because they're like, and one too, that you were putting search and rescue or any of those teams like in risk or taking away resources from over here to over there. And it was a wild time, man. A wild time.
Oh yeah. And I never talked about it. Actually, this is the breaking story, right? Like, really? I never talked about it. Yeah. Because it didn't feel like there was any kind of supportive space where I could be like, yo, I done messed up. And
yeah,
I don't like, there were no resources for people. And I ended up seeing, actually, like sometime in the next year or something, some stats about how all of these really bad injuries went untreated because folks were told not to seek medical assistance. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in that group, and I I sent actually the med center an email at one point just chastising them. Like, you should never tell people not to seek medical assistance if they're whatever. Like, not in like an angry internet troll kind of way, but more like more in a constructive, I do communications for a living, and I really don't think you should ever tell people this again. Never responded, probably. Never responded, probably because there's a lawsuit in there.
Right? I mean, you just got to be careful of how you say things, which, I mean, it's again, still a wild time with that, because first of all, you can never make everybody happy. You just have to be conscious of what you're saying, and the intention behind it, has to be correct, because so many things can be misconstrued. And again, even if your intention's good, it can rile someone up over here. But I think as long as you're at least speaking intentionally, and in those times, I don't think there was any and it was tunnel vision for people. They were like, this is what to do, this is what not to do. And there was no wider scope of how could this affect us in the long run, or if someone is potentially seriously hurt but not like ill, we're telling them not to get help. Like, no.
Right. Like, what if if I was bleeding, I'm sure I would have gone to the hospital, but I was not bleeding.
Still, I mean, with injuries like that, I've heard of several people who've broken like a rib and it's punctured a lung, and they don't know until they woke up like barely breathing or like had to get rushed to the hospital and found out they had a punctured lung. And it's like, slow things or internal bleeding, slow things can be happening when you have breaks like that, accidents like that. That's why it's always good to go and check, make sure there's no little sliver of bone poking something. But that time it was like, no, we don't want to talk to you.
No, we don't want to talk to you. And I just remember telling Johnny, we had the foresight in the week before to get an Airbnb in this little town of Driggs, because we've been living in the vans, and there was no way for me to fight. Like, I'd been getting harassed. Like, he kind of was, but like I had a bunch of people to tell me to go home, and I couldn't tell if that's because I had Colorado plates in Idaho, or if that's because there was all this like anti-BLM stuff going on, and I'm a person of color. Like, what?
Wow, yeah.
Like, things were crazy, and so we had this Airbnb because I was like, I can't deal with this, and thankfully like moved into the Airbnb like the day of the accident. And so that night I was like, Johnny, you sleep in the bed, I'm just gonna sleep on this couch. Like, he's like, what do I do? He was very upset with me that I refused to go to the hospital. In hindsight, we've both agreed that the next time this something like, or hopefully, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but if this ever happens again, we don't listen to the person who's injured. We just do what we think is best.
Yes, that's a key thing. Do not listen to the person who's injured, because usually they're like, I'm okay. And literally can be, because their body might be in shock that they don't know what's really wrong. But that unless it's a hypochondriac or something, that has a history of going to the hospital for a paper cut. Don't listen to them. But again, this time period, there was, I'm sure that had way more to do with it than anything else, that you were literally like feeling that you couldn't go and that you were going to get turned away anyways, or you have all this guilt that you're putting other people at risk, and now you're taking like a nurse or doctor away from someone who could be dying over here in this next room. It was like an insane thing that they were putting on the rest of people when
it was and while that
needed some help.
No, but I will say, the redeeming part of the story is that months later, well, let me step back. So what I told him that night was, I want you to monitor me, right? So like, get up, check and see if I'm still alive. Am I breathing? What's going on? But for now, go get me a frozen pizza and a bottle of wine. Thus began the slippery slope of like trying to heal and maybe not always using the most healthy tools. but using what you have at your disposal. And I will say the redeeming part of this whole thing was that months later, after I'd gone to the spine doctor, they were like, Yeah, you mostly did what we would have had you done. You rested and you didn't put a lot of pressure onto this fractured part of your spine. So anyway, yeah, broke my back. Finally,
Gosh.
this is the year I finally feel like I might actually be whole and complete and not riddled by just like that physical I think like that physical weakness that or fear that comes along post injury, but also like the mental health like ramifications that come along with it of like, can I do this? Am I going to hurt myself? Am I even enough? So yay,
That's
I'm
a
back,
huge
bitches.
piece. Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're back. But those are huge pieces of injuries that I think we that are in our brains the older that we get. My Amber and I have talked about this a lot with just, yeah, as we get older, you kind of feel like you lose that sense of like no fear almost because you're thinking of these other, how it is to be, you've been injured and it may not be a serious injury, but enough to kind of knock you off your game for whatever, a few days, weeks or whatnot, that you're dealing with the mental side of like not working or just not feeling good, and then the fear it is of like what if this happens again, and just getting that confidence back after an injury can take quite a while. So I'm glad that you are coming up on the other side. That's for sure good to hear.
Oh, and it's kind of funny because it's like, well, thanks for being along this journey since 2020. Because if you thought what you saw was interesting in these last 4 years, you just fucking wait.
Yes. So excited for it. So excited for it. And so speaking of, I guess before we get to what's coming, I want to know the background. Like how'd you get into split boarding and snowboarding and all the things? Are you from Colorado originally?
Okay. So let me answer those in the same thread. So my father's family came to Colorado before it was Colorado. So they are Mexican, Spanish, they would identify as Spanish, but they're Mexican. And then they became American. Anyway, long story short, they've been around a long time. They went out to California in the early 20s. Actually, my dad was born in LA, in Santa Monica. My dad was older than my mom. So he was born in 1929. And then his family went out there before that. So maybe even the early 1900s. But we go back. And so my journey, so coming to Colorado I've been here since 2016. And even though I go back and forth between here and visiting my family in California a lot, I there's something that always feels like home here, particularly when I go to the part of Colorado where his family had settled for several generations. And that's over in the San Luis Valley. So in southern Colorado, near the Sagre de Cristo Mountains. And actually, I don't know if you've seen it, but I wrote a story called Colorado Native in the last issue of Backcountry that talks a little bit about like heritage and finding home and what it means to be from a place. So I think that it might resonate with you. But that relates to splitboarding, right? And to snowboarding. So my father was kind of the instigator of the skiing in our family. He taught my mom to ski, and then they would take my sisters and I have two younger sisters. But for the longest time, it was actually just me and my middle sister, who's 1 year younger, because the baby is so much younger and was such a little surprise. So as a family, we would go skiing a few times a year when we were kids, like handful. We were like an LA beach family, so we would go up to Mammoth mostly, and we went up to Big Bear a little bit. My father's first family was there, so he was married to another woman and had other kids before us. But yeah, that's how I started skiing when I was 2, and would ski quite regularly every year until about 14 or 15, which is when my dad got sick, and then I moved to the Central Valley and learned about things like embracing cross country running in 100-degree heat.
Oh my God.
But I think that those experiences, many of which are rooted in like family trauma and like on top of your adolescent BS, is this, or all the things that happen when you're an adolescent, um, is reclaiming skiing, reclaiming like my snow journey. So in 2012, I went up to Oregon for a job at Nike, and I had to make a decision. Like, do I want to be a beach person? I mean, I didn't really, but I had to make a decision if I wanted to be a beach person or an ocean person. And I chose to go back to the mountains, because I'd been surfing a lot in SoCal. And yeah, I went back to the mountains and started snowboarding a ton. Like I'd snowboarded a few times before, like through my, or like in the previous years, but for the most part I was surfing. And so going back into the mountains starting in 2012, I moved to Portland on a contract job for Nike, didn't know anyone. And so I just like bought a snowboard and would go snowboarding all the time. And that's how I started to connect with people and build a friend group, like all through snowboarding. And it was funny to be like a weekend warrior, remote worker, kind of like I could work very flexible hours, and be up in the mountains all the time, up at Mount Hood. And I always wanted to know like what's out there beyond the gates at Meadows. And when I left Nike at the end of 2014, I went on this long trip in South America and started to find out what was beyond those gates. And that's when I began my splitboarding journey, which technically was actually a snowshoe journey with a solid board on my back for a couple of years until I could afford.
Yeah, I was going to say those are still kind of like the earlier days of brands actually manufacturing them, and the ones that were, it was definitely a very costly investment. I mean, it still is for many people, and it's more costly than a solid. But at that time, yeah, I mean, I guess it was a couple years before, because my first, it wasn't mine. I'd used a friend's split board, but it was definitely one that they just cut in half. And
what year is this?
MacGyvered. The first one I used was my friend's. By the time I finally got my own, it was like a K2 split board, and it was when I came to Tahoe, so it was 2014 or 15. I'm trying to remember the house I lived in. I think 2015. But yeah, up to that point, I was just borrowing friends that were cutting their garage and just like the Belay binding kit.
Yes. When I was in South America, I was trying to find someone who would cut my snowboard in half for me, because I was traveling. I don't have a table saw. And I got a couple hot leads, but nothing ever panned out. And when I ended up coming back to the States, South Lake was where I ended up living the first year round. And the first time I ever went touring off of Carson Pass, it was with my extreme snowshoes. I had these really cool snowshoes. I don't know if they're really cool. Whatever, they're cool. Tough snowshoes, but they had these elevators, kind of like like heel risers. Like they had a double heel riser, just like a touring setup, and the forefoot of the snowshoe had this like gnarly crampon, and I would go everywhere. Like I just remember going with Johnny and another like South Lake guy. Like we went out to Elephant's Back, and I remember kind of like coming out, when you have to like climb that little hill to go back to the trail. And it's like, I was like, wow, this takes a long time. Backcountry snowboarding is just like hiking. And then like, it really is. You're just like out there for a long time, making a lot of effort for maybe not always great turns.
Yes. I can tell you,
love it.
That, yeah, that is where I started to kind of veer off. But I was like, you know what? I am spending a lot of time out here for not a lot of the reward, but that's at a time, when you feel so busy and like you just want to get a quickie in, and then you're like, this, nothing about this is a quickie.
No.
And so it's just like you really got to pick your battles there and decide. And that's how I felt with mountain biking. Even the lot I get so annoyed of like doing this one short trail because I'm like, I want a longer ride, but then I've come to love it because I'm like, you know what though? I know exactly how long it takes me to get up and down, and I know that fits within this time frame that I can do it like quickly before work or on a lunch break or quickly after work before the sun goes down. So I actually love this. Like I don't feel
Yeah.
Because it was more of like an ego thing of feeling like bad about myself that's the only trail I get to do because it's so short and easy. But I'm like, no, this is the best because this is what gets me out there. But it's been harder. There are tours like that around here for sure, like split boarding that you can do. But I've just not been. We went the sled route recently. Well, for me
Yeah.
recently in the last couple of years, that has been my easier, quick access go to. Like, let's pop on this machine for a little bit and go rip around.
Yeah.
So I have not been split boarding much the last couple seasons at all. And every year I'm like, I really do, I enjoy it. And I've just had the hardest time making the time for it and finding partners. And that's the struggle. But
I still live in that space of finding partners. I mean, we're based near some of the biggest like the Telluride mountains and the mountains of Silverton, and it's been so hard to find partners for me, which is it's interesting because I don't live in those communities, but you'd think like, oh, mutual friends. But I think I want to pull kind of two things out of that. One is that, I think when we talk about how do we expand the things that we want to see in the outdoor community or outdoor media, first, one of them is moving outside of our comfort zone, right? Like we do that all the time with the activities we do. Why can't we sometimes open up our friend group and invite someone new? Anyone listening? Please extend an invitation to someone that you find to be kind of interesting, because you never know, that person might have such a wonderful perspective, and it's interesting to see how we fall into patterns with our outdoor partnerships. And while that can sometimes hurt, I think it's been incredibly liberating to just realize, like, well, if those folks if folks haven't found my own value, that's fine. I can see my own value, but I can also do things on my own, right? So, like, I tour a lot alone, which is a really interesting thing, and certainly has challenged, I think, some of the terrain that I've been able to get to in the San Juans or feel comfortable in, because a lot of it is so incredibly committing and the snowpack is so tricky.
Yeah, that's a good word.
But it's also kept me humble, and forced me to build more of my mountain craft, as it were. But I think the other part of what I'm hearing you say with, your, like, the way you've compartmentalized these experiences of mountain biking or sledding or split boarding is this idea of reframing how we view our time outside. Are we looking at it to get a quick dopamine hit or adrenaline hit? Are we doing it to kind of like decompress after a long day? Do we need to process, right? Like, for example, I find myself really enjoying long tours or long runs when I need to process something. And those aren't the days that I'm going out for like a hardcore training session. I just want to be outside moving my body.
Yeah.
But then other days I want to achieve something really specific, and maybe I will make sure I find a partner for that, or I will make sure that I'm like teed up mentally to be in that space. And so, yeah, I think I just want to encourage you to remember that, like, no matter whether it's like a 20-minute bike ride or like an all-day tour, all of it's worthy and all of it's good. They just have they just serve different purposes.
Absolutely. And I'm definitely getting better at looking at things that way, because I know that we've talked about this before. Actually, Jen Gurecki was on the show just for a quick, when I did a compilation episode. in the fall in Utah, and she mentioned, this kind of elitist, like mountain town attitude where if you're not doing something crazy hard and difficult, then it doesn't count. And
Mm-hmm.
that's been something that I've mentally fought against for a long time, and finally gotten to a place where, just again, being older and settled about where I'm at and the things I want to do or have time for or whatever, that it's like, but I guess for a while I felt like disappointed that I didn't reach this like peak of this like awesome backcountry adventurer or something. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to get there now. But then I've decided, like, well, that's not actually where I want to be. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at, and I don't have to be doing something extreme. And I've started to do a lot more things like use it like by myself, because if that's what's going to get me out there, I got cross country skis, and a couple years ago, and I've found that just getting out on my skis out my door with my dogs has been a lot more rewarding than trying to go out on this like crazy tour when I know I'm not actually physically like ready for that. And sometimes if I do those things, then I'm even more in my head because I'm like, feel like I'm so behind the people I'm going with or something, that
Right.
I get, a lot more from those kind of cruisy rides or gravel rides with like biking. I'm like, okay, I don't have to be the most extreme mountain biker. I still have a really great time going downhill, but I've also found that I'm in the place where just being able to be on my bike on a dirt road has done so much more for my mental health and like and physical than being this like extreme person. Like, I really enjoy taking this like 18-mile ride into town on the dirt roads, rather than like I'm gonna go up this like 2,000 vert hill and do the downhill by myself, because I know that I'll be more scared, like alone, not having someone if I do get hurt, that I'm going to be white knuckled. Like, didn't enjoy that downhill, like until I'm at the bottom, like, whew, I made it. But on my dirt road, I'm like, cruising, like having, just smiling the whole time. Like, who the fuck am I? Just like smiling like a creep.
I mean, is it creepy though? Like, it's great to smile. And I think totally. like one of the things I want to like remind you and myself and anyone listening of is that the yardstick by which we're measuring ourselves is not a yardstick that is like reflective of our experience, right? Like folks, like people that, especially folks that are making outdoor media, have a combination of privileges and things that they've like actively worked for to be able to do the things that are telling those stories, right? And those things can be typically one of three things, right? It's time, it's money, and it's access.
Yep.
Right? And so like if you have like things like being able to be fit enough requires the time to put into training, right? So like I train for like 1 to 3 hours a day every single day. And that's just so that I can do the things that I'm like I'm looking forward to running a crazy ass 100-mile mountain run this year that has 48K of vert. So like that's gonna be fun for me. Like last year I didn't talk about it. Apparently I'm supposed to brag about this stuff or something. Like I ran a couple of ultras that had like at least like just for me. I didn't put it on the internet. I didn't like make a bunch of photos about it. I was like, this is just a fun thing I want to do. Like that's my yardstick, and I'm enjoying the fact that I ran 30 miles with 9K of vert. Or well, another one was 11. But anyway, like, does it need to be something that I talk about, which is a whole other thing? Because now I'm trying to think about like when I'm looking at an adventure and feeling like successful or healthy or like I had a good time or am I enjoying it? The thing that I'm thinking about is like who am I measuring myself against, right? Am I measuring myself against the like Kilian Jornet, the mountain runner, or like am I looking at my splitboarding journey and like stacking it against Jeremy Jones? Because both of those folks have things that I don't have, right? Like I don't have, like I have a business. I'm active, like not that those folks don't have businesses, but like I'm building all of these things from scratch and figuring it out along the way and finding folks to help along the way. But most of it is effort that I have to put so much time and into. Like I probably work like 50-hour weeks plus often. I'm definitely working a 40-hour week every week just on the different projects that I'm working on. Plus I have all of these other things that I want to do in terms of like keeping myself fit and sane and happy. Plus, as noted, we have a farm. So
yes.
So like, if I like in the past have been like, oh, I didn't like get on top of as many summits as I wanted to this winter. For example, I didn't summit it like I'm making this is not actually a made up number. I didn't tell myself I need to like have 10 big committing lines under my belt. But if I had, well, guess what? I didn't do it. But I did have 10 really cool community oriented events. And so you have to ask yourself, like, what are the goals that I'm setting? Like, are they goals that are grounded in my reality of like who I am and what I'm doing with my time? And if these goals aren't something that are attainable for me, like what is?
Yep.
Like what does feel 10 to 20% within my attainability, right? Like, for example, if I right now was like, I want to sail a sailboat around the world and sustain myself off of just food that I fish or find in local markets when I go to port, like, is that reasonable goal for me within the year? Probably not. You know why? Because I don't know how to like do more than like row a boat. I don't know how to sail. Second, where am I going to get the sailboat? Third, like, where am I going to get all this money? Like, so
exactly,
like
to take a year off to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said for, and that's an extreme example, but like when we're setting these goals with our business or athletic achievement, or like for someone like myself or for you, like the combination of the two, there's so much of grounding those goals in our like current lived existence and in our like future or aspirational lived existence. And I think it's really important because,
it is.
Things aren't free, and time is finite.
Exactly. And I mean, again, we talk a lot on the podcast just about, comparison and with social media and stuff. And again, that's something I think a lot of us are working on. So I love that you found these ultras, you're running for yourself. You're not feeling like I have to post this or share this, I don't have to update my Strava immediately and be like, look what I did kind of thing. Or you're not comparing it to anybody else. And, I try to have this different lens than I may used to have instead of looking at social media and being like, oh, I wish I was doing what so-and-so is doing. And that sucks that I have to just be here and work or what, blah, 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 blah. And now it's just like, oh, good for them. They're doing that. Cool. I don't really want to be there in that space. Or even if I did, I know that I have a lot more to like a lot of boxes to check before I can get to that point. So if it's something I really want to do, I have to do exactly what you said. Like, look at what my reality is now and actually plan for it, not just be like, I'm gonna go do this, get a realistic time frame in mind and really kind of start to plan out, how could I make this happen? Like, I'd love to take a bikepacking trip up to Washington, and I'm like, I get gung-ho about things, or like, I'm just gonna do it, and then I'm like, oh wait, that's going to take a month? Yeah, okay, so that's going to take a lot more planning of time, resources. I can't just get up and go. And so, I've just grounded that into, this is still a goal, but it's most likely not going to happen this year, but I could probably start planning for it for next year. But it's going to take a lot more time and effort because, I have a million things going on, and don't have the just ability to go up and say, hey, here I go. And not many people do. People who you see these things posted, they also maybe took years on the back end to do it. We just don't see that. So we have to remember that too. Like, we're not seeing all the back end things. And it's just try to look at the lens of yourself first.
Right. And I think I want to pull out something that I think is between the lines of what you're saying. And that's that we also need community to get us there. Right. So like that supportive network, maybe it's like, for me, it hasn't yet been coaches. Like I use a training plan I got from Training Pete's for $50. Right. So like, that's how I'm finding this training plan that's accessible to me. But one day I'll be able to get a coach, for however that much that costs, whether that's like $100 a month or like $300 or $500, I don't know. Or maybe it's, buying a course, like, or not buying a course, going to like a course that costs, $1,000 or $2,000 and learning some skills in community. Or maybe it's just showing up to places where I can volunteer some skills, but learn other skills And I think there's so much of our goal achievement that is rooted in being in community with others that we don't talk about. So there's this huge thing of like, even if you don't have the skills to be an entrepreneur or have the whatever the know-how and like time to build a certain type of adventure, oftentimes showing up in the spaces is what can like help us start to get into that, which I know I'm keeping an eye on the clock here and I want to be cognizant. But you know, you'd asked about the production company and this film series, and I'd say kind of like the same kind of thing, like pushing myself into that space, like into this new type of storytelling, even though I've been doing storytelling for years. Was a big part of that was finding folks that wanted to be a part of that journey or that had some know-how in that space. And it's continued to evolve. And I've, you know, certainly had some toxic relationships, but I've also had some really healing and beautiful ones that have been part of this storytelling journey. And now that I started a production company, this entrepreneurship journey. And yeah, I think it's been so interesting to see how, you know, when my goal to shift the types of stories that we see out there, like tell inspiring adventure stories, but root them in an exploration of our human experience.
Yeah.
You know, in the case of Outlier, it's like the exploration of what identity and community and belonging mean to our survival as a species, right? So that intersection of adventure and self and community, right? So telling this beyond an anthropocentric storytelling lens, like what does it look like to open that aperture and bring in more perspectives and more light, right? Like to this space of that's a story beyond Stoke. And so, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this alone. And so if I hadn't found folks to be a part of this journey, well, this story wouldn't exist. So there's something really powerful to think about, like who is a part of your journey, because that definitely informs the story that's told.
I love that so much, because that is just another battle in myself that I have to face at times where, and it's interesting, I just did this, I'm doing a course with Justine and a freelance bootcamp course. Yeah. And we talked about saboteurs recently. And so controller is like my main one. And so, yeah, trying to let go of, and basically one of the attributes of that is that the feeling, if I can't let anyone else gonna do it, no one else can do it because I'm gonna do it the right way, kind of thing. Like I just have to do it myself if I want it done right. And I'm really trying to let go of those feelings. And that comes into even simple things of like planning a trip, a bike ride, or just going out. And not that it has to be done the right way, but like, oh, I'm just going to go out by myself because I don't really want to do what someone else might want to do today. I just want to go listen to my own body and do this and that. And it's kind of, which is good in some points, but other times it's like really shutting off that community aspect. And I'm trying to find that balance again. And that's where, you know, I just want to plug real quick, the ILA app for that is I really hope to be using that this summer to find some biking buddies, gravel or mountain bike, and start putting myself out there again with riding with people. But it's just a self-conscious battle with fitness levels or uphill climbing. But I digress. I do want to get back to the Outlier series, because I know that's around community and sharing stories and all that. And is this your first? So I saw a film this fall when I was at the event Swell, and it featured you, and it was just kind of like a little mini documentary, you sharing your life with running in the farm and whatnot. And then I found the Outlier. So it took me a minute to figure out if that was the same story or not. Is the Outlier series all snow stories? Okay.
Well, yeah, I would say yes and no. So the film I think you're referencing is Well Worn Life.
Yes, that's it.
Yep. So Well Worn Life with yours truly. I hate saying the full title because it's really strange to be like, Well Worn Life with Dani Reyes Acosta. Watch my movie.
There it is. People do it.
Yeah, it's a short documentary that's like, it's 6 minutes long, and it is exactly goes into the question of like, what is a well-worn life? So they come to the farm, and I take my friends running and rock climbing, and then a little bit of snow travel. But if anyone who works in media or has ever gone touring knows, it's really hard to shoot video in the snow. So I gave them clips from other projects. But the Well Worn Life project was spearheaded by my friends over at Lives in Designs, who make amazing pants. This is not a commercial; they just do make amazing pants. And then,
Oh,
yeah, have you
I
seen their
love
new
them.
overalls?
Yeah.
The
Yes.
new overalls with the pea zipper, the Nara pea.
Yep. We had the
So
Nara, we had Georgia of Nara on here, and then I saw the Lives In a couple weeks
Mhm.
ago. It's a new brand that the store I work at just picked up too. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. And okay, yeah, then I do remember diving in and
So
seeing that Lives In did that film with you. I was like, oh, I love this full
yeah,
circle thing for me.
that that was their project. Sidebar for anyone who likes overalls, go look at the Lizen Nara overalls, because you will never have to take your overalls off to go to the bathroom if you are a person with a vagine ever
Yep.
again. Anyway,
And the Kickstarter's coming up for those, so
yeah.
I'm gonna link that too. But yeah,
Oh, I
anyways.
have a pair. They're so sick. I wish I was wearing them today, but I love them. Anyway, so the Lives In started that project with me, and then I got to do the project with our friends over at Black Elk, who are an Arkansas-based media house. But for them, obviously, I was the subject, but I also did some story, production, and then locations. So that is not a part of the Outlier film series. It is just something that Afuera Productions was a part of. And I started Afuera Productions for the second episode of Outlier just after a really tricky experience with the first production company. And so, Afuera Productions is now this company that I have that's making media that lives it's making culturally acute media that's at the crux of our future. And so the idea is to make mostly documentary, some branded content, that all lives in like film and short form storytelling. So, also social storytelling. And the idea of culturally acute is that people that have lived the story are behind the camera as much as in front of the camera.
Wow, I
So
love
to try
that.
and keep imagine if you were you in your body, would you
Hmm.
want just a bunch of dudes telling your story?
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
story would turn out right, like the story would turn out differently if it was
Hmm.
someone that didn't share some of your identities with you. But yeah, no. Well Worn Life is separate from Outlier. Outlier is a project I came up with as a part of my like healing journey, like in 2020, like living in this rural town, having these injuries, feeling like I was othered no matter what, and finding myself kind of in a new and different space of like, what does it mean to be a woman or a split boarder or a runner or a business person, and like no matter what, feeling like I just didn't fit in. And then I was like, this isn't difficult. This is actually the thing that is making me who I am, and I love it. And that series is really meant to be an exploration of our journey, but also like that which ties us together, and hopefully an exploration of the values of what we want to see in our world in the future. And so episode 2 is in, we're just wrapping up production now, and you will see it in the theaters this fall. So I'm excited to give a shout out to our sponsors, and this is a new one. I'm so thankful to the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, who just gave us a grant. We're also working with Deuter USA, who makes backpacks and luggage, and those are also a sponsor of mine. So if you haven't gotten their backpacks yet, I will make sure you get one, Taryn, because they're freaking awesome. And then we also working with Fisher, Ski, Weston Backcountry, and in Optics, Voided USA, which is amazing blankets and comfort stuff, all 100% recycled plastics. And then Latino Outdoors and Winter Wildlands Alliance, also a new granting organization. But maybe most importantly, people like you, because we ran a crowdfunder. So thank you for supporting Taryn and anyone else listening. We will be doing some giveaways in the fall. So we're going to be giving away like really, really big, like $1,000 to $3,000 prize packages. And all you have to do
Wow.
to be able, yeah, like all you have to do to be able to like win a prize package is pledge 40, $50. So yeah, we had a
That's
friend that
super
won a
cool.
split. We had a friend that won a split board, community member that won a split board this spring after we wrapped up our crowdfunder. She, bought her $40 ticket and won $1,000 split board.
That's amazing. And all for good, like to support you, your project, your team, everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you can do something like that and you're able to donate to something and potentially then get something super cool back is amazing. That's so cool. And
Uh,
so the first series, I just have to like really point this out because it's blowing my mind. The first or I guess I don't know, episode or
Episode?
however
Yeah.
you frame it in the Outlier series was with a different production company, and it just didn't go so
Mm-hmm.
smoothly that you were like, I'm gonna make this happen in a different way that tells my story better, and went out and started your own production company.
I would say that's a version of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
certainly. I found that for the way that the work needed to get done, it would be better for me to have that creative control and I think to be able to bring in the collaborators that were really going to get the job done in a way that felt like it would honor everyone involved. So
Yeah.
not just me as the producer and director, but also our sponsors and our other teammates and for the way that I wanted the business done, it felt like I needed to start the business.
Yes.
So I
Well,
solved
see,
my own problem.
yeah, that's the way that I tend to work as well, and that is where I feel like the controller isn't always the saboteur. It actually
Yeah.
is helpful, and you just have to find the ways that, at the times it works against you, but then I think this is a time where it like worked for you because you saw that there's a problem there, and that, as you touched on, having the people who are behind the scenes who have lived the story, I think that is so huge. And that's something that I've recently been thinking about with work. And I've talked about I had a gal, Andrea Kelly, on the podcast. And, we talked about the value of the person who's lived the experiences being able to be on the other side. And sometimes that's hard because you may not have the experience on paper, like the bachelor's degree for like this job or whatever, but you've lived these experiences in so many different ways that put you in such a different perspective than people who just had one route to it. So someone who may be an expert,
Right.
videographer or whatnot, but they don't have the experience maybe being a woman or a woman of color or with any other of these kind of obstacles. Like their storytelling their edit will look or feel a little different. I feel like you can really have the
Totally.
energy comes through the storytelling when the person has actually lived these experiences or can relate to them. And that's why I have focused this podcast on women, because just that in general in the outdoors so much, because me and Amber have so much more of a connection telling these stories than like this man, like middle-aged man story or something. Sure, they're great. I love them. We can tell stories, but I think that because of the way we've structured our podcast and our guests, that we're able to have a much more personal connection with people, which then makes the story that we're trying to share come out differently than any other way. So
Yes. Yeah, it's honestly, and I have to give the Well Worn Life team like such credit because working with the Blackout folks and Lives in folks like made me realize that like this is what healthy team dynamics can look like. And so going into like my team building for episode 2 crew, I realized like even between like our first shoot and our final shoot, I was like, what I really need aren't people that just want to do the job or are like stoked on the story, but I want people who are showing up as vulnerable or as collaborative or as like really just like that's what I wanted as a creative and as a team leader, and so that's what I got. And our shoot that we had in the Tetons was so beautiful because we had people just out there living their truths, like Sam Davies, Charlotte Perkle, Carly Fink, Sophia Schwartz, like out there just like supporting each other and developing stuff. And I think we made a cool movie.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been the same if we didn't have all of those folks showing up, right? Because I think in documentary film, when you're asking people to be truly vulnerable in a space that is potentially deadly, you have to have it's like the team dynamic that you cultivate is so incredibly important, and that team showed up, and it was just such a gift to work with all of those folks, you know. And I will also say, right, like the creative team that was on that shoot, like I was the only person of color behind the camera as the director and producer, and yet like the folks that I got to work on my team were still telling the story and still shooting in a way that felt like it honored, you know, Vanessa and my journey. But that was because like I got to play that other role. So anyway, we could go deeper on like ways to storytell, but I think more than anything, I just want to give credit to those folks for showing up as how they represented themselves to be, and it created like such a beautiful dynamic.
Yeah, well, when you can create that like little community when working on projects like that, and so that comes back to our just, you know, the importance of community and what you're doing with Outlier and trying to share those stories and all that. I know you've got a jet, and as always with all our guests, we could talk on and on and on. And I just hope so much to be able to have you again, maybe in the fall when Outlier's coming out or something, and we can talk more. Every guest I want to have on, you know, multiple times, like so we could take one subject and dive so deep. But before we head out, I just want to make sure you have a chance to tell everyone where they can find you. As you all know out there, everything will be in the show notes, resources to find the Outlier and Well-Worn Life and the piece you did in Backcountry. But yeah, if people want to try to connect as directly with you as possible, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Not Lost, Just Discovering, at Afuera Productions. That's AFUERA _productions, and at Outlier Film Series. You can also connect with me directly. If it's for work things, I would love it if you would connect with me on LinkedIn, whether that's, I post regularly about grant opportunities for all types of media, not just documentary film. I regularly try to post opportunities I just hear about in the industry. But I also just love LinkedIn.
Yes, me too. It's my newfound love. I'm obsessed with it. I've kind of been off it for a few weeks, but trying to get back on. I've done so much great networking through there that I'm like, this is the best platform right now out there in the social-ish world, because it's beyond that. So yeah.
Yeah, just find me there at my name, Dani Reyes Acosta, and at Afuera Productions, where we will be posting information on events and grants and all sorts of other things. One of the things I'm really looking forward to is growing my creative network. So if you are a writer, photographer, cinematographer, anything, please look me up. I would love to connect and just be in your orbit. Other than that, I would say, find us on outlierfilmseries.com Outlier Film Series through Instagram, but also our website. Sign up for our newsletter. At some point, I will start putting newsletters out when I make the time.
Awesome.
But I promise
know how that is.
Yes, long story short, I won't spam you.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dani, so much for joining me this morning, and we're excited to see what happens with the Outlier. Continue to follow your journeys, and hopefully have you back someday, especially so you can chat with Amber and you guys can talk about your ducks.
Oh my gosh, please, let's talk about the intersection of farm life and entrepreneurship. I can't wait.
Absolutely. We'll have a great
thank
rest
you for having me.
Yes, of course. Have a great rest of your day, and hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Thanks, Karen. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode and would do us a huge favor, since we don't have any sponsors or anything like that, and would rate and review us on whatever platform it is you use, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, whatever it is. And if you're listening and downloading just through the website, tearingituppodcast.com, leave comments. We'll definitely engage back with you. And on social media right now, we're just on Instagram. Tearing It Up Podcast is the handle. Like the post, share the post, comment on the post, whatever it is you got. Show us your love so we just stay relevant and show up in the rankings at all. So again, rate and review, please. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.